So we're getting started with our webinar. So I'd like to just welcome everyone to this 7th edition of the Negotiation and Conflict Management Collaborative webinar series, where we invite authors from all over the world who wrote on books on topics that are relevant, even if not at the center of negotiation and conflict management, to expand our understanding of these topics and allow us to become better as negotiators or conflict managers. Before I pass on to our speaker of the day, just a few house rules. We have the audience muted and the video off. The chat box is only for host posting. And remember, at the end, we will post quite a few things. So we're going to use useful links, useful information, but at the end of the webinar, so stay until the end, including information about our speaker, his company, and his book, so you can learn more about it and you can pre-order it. The Q&A tab is open for you, though, and I would like to invite you to start putting questions as soon as possible. For those of you who've been here before, you know that not all questions will be answered. So the sooner you put yours, the more upvotes you get, the more likely your question will be asked. And if you don't have a question, but you really like someone's question, please do upvote it, because we do ask the questions that get the most votes from the audience. The recording will be made available at a later date. Usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to go up to the NCMC website. So look for it at the NCMC website if you would like to make reference. We usually do advertise that it's published as well on LinkedIn. With that, let me move on to the juicier stuff, the reason why you're here. So today we have the pleasure of having Adam Kahane, co-founder of Rios Partner, and who wrote the book Collaborating with the Enemy: How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust. And today is going to address us with a talk of the same topic. He's actually having a 2nd edition of the book that's coming out soon. And he is opening that for pre-orders with a discount for this group, because this is the first talk he's giving since the book came into his 2nd edition. I read the book, the 1st edition though, and it was extremely, extremely eye-opening for me. And I hope it will be the same for you. So without further ado, let me pass it on to Adam. Adam, thank you so much for joining. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Horacio. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, as you said, this book first came out 8 years ago, but I've spent the past year rewriting it completely. I think you'll be surprised. It's about 50% new, bigger, and with exercises. And indeed, this is the first time I present it. So I'm a little nervous about that. The first in-person presentation will be in a few weeks to a global conference of divorce lawyers who have always been loyal fans of this particular book, and then the global launch will be in Dubai and then in Riyadh in November. So the best way to explain what this work is about, what this book is about, is to say that for the past 34 years, I have been focusing on the question, what does it take to live and work together across our differences? I got started in this on this question. I guess you could say this question found me 34 years ago. In 1991, I was an employee of Shell, working in the strategic planning department in London, and we received a request a bit out of the blue from a group of academics and politicians in South Africa who wanted to use the Shell strategic planning methodology to think about how to affect the transition from apartheid to democracy. Nelson Mandela had been released from prison 1 year before. The first democratic elections were not until 1994. So this was right in the middle when nobody knew what would happen. Actually, I think most people were pessimistic about a peaceful outcome. And this request came to Shell. And as I was the youngest and most expendable member of the department, I was dispatched and ended up in 1991 facilitating a process that became known as the Montfleur scenario exercise. That was extraordinary in that it brought together in a conversation about how to affect this transition people from across leaders, 28 leaders from across South African society, opposition and establishment, left and right, black and white, women and men, politicians, business people, academics, trade unionists, community activists. So this was an extraordinary experience for me. Made a small contribution to the ultimately peaceful transition in South Africa a few years later. It had a huge impact on me. I ended up, to make a long story short, resigning from Shell and emigrating from London to Cape Town and marrying the organizer of the project. So this is how I got involved in this work I've been doing for the last 34 years. Now, as the co-founder of an organization, a global organization called Rios Partners, doing this kind of work. That's to say, bringing together people from across the system to work together to transform a system, everything from the Civil War in Colombia to US-China relations, to food systems, to climate change, to indigenous rights in the Americas, in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Europe. So 34 years, lots of trial, lots of error, lots of learning. And my books, this is the sixth book, are about the theory derived from that practice. And I guess I would summarize it by saying that what I've learned is that it is possible to work together with people we don't agree with or like or trust. It is possible to live and work together across differences, but it isn't easy or straightforward or guaranteed. And in parallel with this working experience over these years, it won't surprise you when I say that I've noticed parallel dynamics in everyday life, in my everyday life, at work with colleagues, at home with family, differences, disagreement, disharmony, sometimes breakdowns, sometimes breakthroughs. And so I keep coming back to this question: what does it take to live and work together across our differences? And one of the reasons that I was keen to prepare a second edition of this book is because it seems to me that this question is even more important now in this time of increasing fragmentation and polarization and even demonization, where it's both more important and more difficult to work together across differences. When you write a book, I guess you're allowed to make up one word, and I've made up one word for this book, which is the word enemifying, or the verb enemifying, the act of creating enemies. So I'm not saying we never have enemies. Sometimes we do, people who are trying to harm or injure us. But these days, that word enemy is applied very broadly in a way that's counterproductive. So what I'm going to do in this next 25 minutes is just to share the core theory in the book. The slides are all images from the book that my colleagues and I have developed based on this experience that I've just summarized over the world, all over the world. And the first is just to make this point about collaborating. If you do a Google search with the word, or an image search with the word collaborating, you get lots of images like this. I don't know whether this was actually taken in a INSEAD a class or not, but this image of this interesting, productive, friendly, creative conversation among different people. So that's one meaning of the word collaborating. In the dictionary, the first definition of the word collaborating is simply to working jointly with. But I remember, and this will surprise you, but I remember as a child seeing this famous photograph in a book it's such a striking photograph. It stayed with me. This is a picture of two women in Brittany, France, at the conclusion of the Second World War. Two women who were accused of having collaborated with Nazi occupiers and who were, as you can see, shoeless with their clothes torn, head shaved, paraded in the street. So this second meaning of the word collaborating, which in the dictionary is cooperating traitorously with the enemy, is the farthest thing away from being fun and creative and friendly. It's probably the worst thing that could happen to you is to be accused of betraying your own people. And the reason this double meaning of the word collaborating is so important to me is that I think this is why, in summary, collaborating is so is not straightforward, easy or straightforward or guaranteed. Because on the one hand, we think we need to work with those other people to get where we're trying to go. And on the other hand, we worry that doing so will require us to betray what we hold most dear. So this double meaning, which is so important especially in the French language, but to a lesser extent in other languages, is central to my understanding about collaborating. So the question I'm posing in this book is not whether to collaborate, but more specifically with whom and when and how to collaborate. One of the images in the new editions, I decided to take this idea of enemies more seriously in the second edition, and to make the point that we have this increasing tendency to divide the world into friends and enemies. Friends, people we agree with and like or trust; enemies, people we don't agree with or like or trust; friends, the people we can collaborate with; enemies, the people we can't collaborate with. And I think this represents a very fundamental misunderstanding, and that I think a more useful and pragmatic and realistic understanding is that it's shades of gray. And there are people there we may not need to or want to collaborate with our friends. We may need to collaborate with our so-called enemies. And so my first provocation is that rather than the world being divided into black and white, it's more useful to think about shades of gray, people with whom, under particular circumstances, we might need to collaborate. So that's the answer to the first question, with whom to collaborate, is to say, well, it all depends. There are shades of gray. The second question about when to collaborate is shown in this slide. And it makes the simple point that collaborating is not our only option. You'll really get confused if you think you have to collaborate. It's obviously not true. We can't collaborate with everybody on everything. It's literally impossible. But the question is, when do we need to collaborate? And I offer this very simple decision tree. Can we change our situation? If yes, can we change it unilaterally? If yes, then we do what we want to do, regardless of what other people want. If no, then we collaborate, work together with others. If we can't change our situation, can we live with it as it is? If yes, we adapt. And if no, we exit. And these four options are almost always present. Forcing, adapting, and exiting are unilateral choices. Collaborating is, by definition, requires a mutual choice. But this basic point that collaborating is not our only option, and that it depends on how we understand our context at this time. It may not be stable. And in this sense, collaborating and negotiating are closely aligned concepts. So that's the answer to the second question. The first question, with whom to collaborate. The second question, when to collaborate. And then the third question, which is the focus of most of the book, is how to collaborate. And this is a recipe for collaborating. Number one, prioritize the good of the whole. Number two, agree on the problem, the solution to the problem, the plan to implement the solution. And number three, agree who will do what to implement the plan. And I know we don't have a polling capacity on this webinar, but I'd like to just ask you to take a moment to think, do you think this is a good recipe? Do you think in general, this is a good recipe for collaborating? Yes or no? So maybe make a little mental note. Do you think this is a good recipe for collaborating? Yes or no? I see people are showing a thumbs up. I'm not sure, but I guess that means that many of you think this is a good recipe. So here is, I think, the most useful or the central idea of the book, maybe the most useful. And my answer is yes, but only under certain circumstances. And this is, Horacio, you may appreciate this is something that was not in the first edition. This is a major clarification, actually in an odd way arose from a study visit a year ago in the Emirates. But my current understanding, which is not the same as my understanding of first edition, is that conventional collaboration following this recipe works only under conditions where the level of conflict is low and the level of complexity is low. Under those circumstances, conventional collaboration works beautifully. And most people think collaboration and conventional collaboration are the same thing. Maybe that's what the thumbs up in the reactions showed. But I'm arguing, and this I think is the most important point I want to leave you with in this webinar, is that when we are in a context where the level of conflict is high and or the level of complexity is high, then conventional collaboration does not work and cannot work. And the kind of collaboration which is required, the kind of collaboration which is effective, is what I call stretch collaboration. I would argue that the reason collaborating across difference is currently increasingly important and increasingly difficult is because we're living in a context where the level of conflict in many contexts is high and the level of complexity in many contexts is high. And therefore, what I'm defining as stretch collaboration is necessary more and more often. So this is the last slide I'm going to show, and I'll spend a while on this because this is really the core contribution of the book, is to say that there is a conventional collaboration, which is what most people think is the only kind of collaboration, and a different kind, which is what I first encountered in South Africa 34 years ago and has been the work I and my colleagues in Rios have been doing all day, every day over these decades since, and that I call stretch collaboration. So let me go through this, and then I'm really very interested to hear your questions. So I hope you're putting questions in the Q&A box. So the way I break this down is to say that there are three dimensions of collaborating. The way we engage with our collaborators, the way we engage with the context we're part of, and the way we ourselves act, or you could say how we contribute to our collaboration, how we engage with ourselves. Conventional collaboration is what I was hinting at when I said there was a conventional recipe that many of you thought was a good recipe. And that recipe is that, number one, we prioritize the goals and harmony of the team as a whole. So we say, could you please leave your own agenda at the door? We often say this in organizations. Think of the larger whole, think of the team, think of the organization, think of the country, depending on the scale of the conversation, think about the planet. Let's prioritize that, and we'll figure out what to do with our differences secondarily. The second feature of conventional collaboration is we have to agree on what the problem is. We have to agree on what the solution of the problem is. We have to agree on the plan to implement the solution, and we have to agree on who will do what. I guess you could say this is a linear approach to problem solving. And thirdly, in order to implement that, what I have to do is to give and follow directions depending on my role, take directions from those above me, give directions to those below me. So this is my definition of conventional collaboration. And as I've said, this is the most common understanding of what collaborating is. This is the way most people think collaboration has to work. It does work very well under circumstances where complexity is low and conflict is low. However, it doesn't work under conditions where complexity is high and/or conflict is high. And in that case, what is required is what I'm calling stretch collaboration, an approach which is, you could say, 180 degrees different from conventional collaboration, requires us to do practically the opposite of what we're used to doing. And this is why I call it stretch collaboration. Stretch, with an analogy to physical stretching, you're doing something that requires you to go beyond your habitual or comfortable zone in order to be able to deal with a greater range of situations. So rather than prioritizing the goals and harmony of the team as a whole, we embrace conflict as well as connection. We recognize that in such contexts, there's no such thing as one whole. There are multiple wholes. You could use the word whole on, a whole that is part of larger wholes, and that the request, could you please leave your own interests at the door, is illegitimate and probably manipulative. I realized early on that this request, please leave your own interest at the door, works for one or maybe two people in the room. It works for the mediator, and it works for the boss. But for everybody else, it's we have lots of concern with our team, our department, our family, our identity. And there are, of course, commonalities, but there are differences. And in stretch collaboration, we have to embrace conflict as well as connection. I worked a lot in Colombia, particularly in the 1990s, including with a man named Juan Manuel Santos, who went on to become president of Colombia and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2016 for having achieved a peace treaty with the FARC, the guerrilla army. And on the day he won the Nobel Peace Prize, I was very surprised that he referred to the work we'd done together 20 years before, that's to say in 1996. Of course, I was delighted, but I was a bit surprised. So many other and bigger things had happened in the intervening 20 years. And a few months later, I was in Bogota, and I conducted a public interview of Santos, and I asked him, why did you refer to this set of workshops we'd done in 1996 called Destino Colombia, Destiny Colombia? And why do you so often refer to it? He used to refer to it in speeches every month. And he gave a very interesting answer, which didn't make it into the first edition, but did make it into the second edition of the book. He said, the reason I so often refer to Destino Colombia is that's when I realized, contrary to all of my political and cultural upbringing, it is possible to work with people we do not agree with and will never agree with. And for me, this was a very important point. We imagine, well, we'll have a conflict, we'll get together, we'll have a drink, a meal, we'll relax, we'll find, it was all a terrible misunderstanding. And maybe that's true, but often it's not. We'll find we don't agree, and we'll never agree, and yet we still have to find a way to live together. And the example Santos gave was very interesting, was the example of his relationship with Hugo Chavez, then the president of Venezuela. It was obvious before they met that Santos and Chavez would never agree. One was a revolutionary Bolivarian socialist, the other was a neoliberal conservative Democrat, and yet they were presidents of neighboring countries, had things to do together that they did do together, even though they did not agree and would never agree. The second dimension of stretch collaboration is experimenting a way forward. And I guess this might be an important distinction between the approach that I'm calling collaborating or stretch collaborating on the one hand and negotiating on the other. It's not primarily about reaching an agreement or making a deal, although that's important. And in the case of the Colombian example, the peace treaty was important, but important things also happened before and are continuing to happen since. And so what's required in practice in situations of high complexity and high conflict is to experiment a way forward. And here I would refer to, I'm from Montreal, to Montreal's greatest management professor, I think a professor at NCEAD, Henry Mintzberg, if memory serves me right, who has written very compellingly that almost all strategy is understood only in retrospect through emergence. I think he calls it emergent strategy, and that's what I mean by experimenting a way forward. And finally, and most fundamentally, what's required in stretch collaboration is not simply to tell other people what they ought to do, but to realize that you yourself are a player in the game. And here I'd like to acknowledge the person who first pointed this out to me, a man named Bill Torbert, management professor at Boston University, who passed away just last week. So I want to honor him. And he said to me several decades ago, Adam, you know this 60s expression, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. This isn't the most important point. The most important point is if you're not part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. In other words, if you can't see how you yourself are contributing to things being the way they are, then it follows logically that you have very little capacity to change the way things are, except from the outside by force. And in situations of high complexity and high conflict, we can make a difference by recognizing that we are part of the game. So when I made this slide, I realized that the key feature of conventional collaboration is that it is unitary, one superior whole, one best root, one paramount leader. And the key feature of stretch collaboration is plurality, multiple diverse wholes or whole-ons, multiple emergent possibilities, multiple co-creators. So this is my answer to the question of what it takes to live and work together across our differences. It requires choosing with whom and when and how to collaborate. That is not easy or straightforward or guaranteed. It requires stretching, but it is possible, and increasingly it is necessary. So thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to your questions.
Wonderful, Adam. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. You're seeing already the claps coming in, the reactions and all. And we have, I will probably argue, a record number of questions so far. So let's get them going. There are several questions. People already start upvoting on them. So if you now can take a quick minute or two, the audience, to take a look at the questions you like the most, to upvote so that we can get them priority. So Adam, are you ready? Can I get started?
Yes,
Super
I'm
good.
all ears.
So, do you have any specific advice for gaslighting and passive aggressive behavior? Thanks as always for these sessions. Yeah, go ahead. So, just gaslighting and passive aggressive behavior. How do you collaborate, or any specific advice on handling that?
Well, I'm probably going to answer most of these questions with the same answer, but I want to go back to the fundamentals. You don't have to collaborate. It's just one option. You may say, these people, they're too difficult, they're unreasonable, they're gaslighting me, they're passive aggressive, I don't like them, they're mean, they're bullies, they're stupid, they're enemies, whatever. Lots of reasons, perfectly understandable reasons, in which case you have three other options. You can try to force things to be the way you want them to be, regardless of what others want. You can try to adapt to things as they are. You can just quit, get a divorce, quit your job, emigrate. These are all, under most circumstances, or under many circumstances, you have all three of these other options, or at least two of them. The situation I'm interested in is, I may not want to work with these people for any of the above reasons, but I think I have to, or I think it'd be better if I could.
Yeah.
And then the question is how. And what most of us do, what I do almost all of the time, is at first I spend all my time thinking about what they're doing wrong. And then, and then after several hours or days or weeks, or in extreme cases, months, it finally occurs to me, yes, I don't really like what they're doing, but I wonder where they're coming from. Why do they think the way they think? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they saying what they're saying? And I think that's the crucial step, is to say, let me try to understand where they're coming from. I don't like it. I think it's unfair or mean or whatever, but in order to find a way forward, I have to try to see it from their perspective. And most fundamentally, and this is the third stretch, I have to at least be willing to consider, I wonder what I'm doing, which is contributing to things being the way they are. That's the big shift. So that's my answer, and let's call that answer number one, because if I get another question, I may just say answer number one again.
Answer number one again. There you go. But I think that the second question, there's a bit of a stretch on number one. Maybe it's a 1.5. So it goes a bit about how does one then get to collaborate, not just with an enemy, but someone who actually doesn't want to collaborate. So
yeah. So it's a great question, and I think this is the question I'm most commonly asked, because it is crucial. Collaboration requires both or all parties by definition. It's not a unilateral act, and chronologically, that's the first question. And so I think the first thing is, and the way the question was phrased, as you reported it, how do I get them to? This already betrays what for me is a dead end. I can't get people to do anything. I can't.
No, they actually. Sorry. It's how do you collaborate with someone? That's how it was phrased. Not how do you force collaboration on someone, which I understand then betrays the idea.
No. It's just because in English, people very often say, "How do I get people to?" And so I'm alert to that. Maybe I made that up in my head. I'm so used to it. So I think the answer is. I have two practical suggestions. One, I can try to change the context so that collaborating with me is more interesting to them. That's what marches in the streets are about. That's what occupying somebody's office is about. That's what putting pressure on to make negotiating or collaborating a more interesting option from the other side. That would be one approach. The other approach, which I often mention because I think it's practical and often not thought of, is to start not with what I wish they would do, but by asking, what is it that matters to them? And in particular, to try to answer the following question: in what way is the situation problematic from their perspective? So my teacher, the late Kees van der Heijden, my boss at Shell, used to tell me, Adam, the situations we're dealing with in Shell, in South Africa at the time, are not problems that have solutions. They're problematic situations that are problematic for different actors for different reasons. So I think it's important to realize we don't need to agree on the problem. We may view the situation as problematic for different reasons. And an interesting way to start is to ask, either directly or indirectly, for this other party, what about the situation is problematic? It might be something completely different from the way it's problematic for me. It may be just the prospect that there's a risk that what they're doing isn't going to work. And with that insight, you may be able to formulate the invitation to collaboration in a way that's low threshold, high ceiling. In other words, doesn't cost much to get involved, but has potential for helping them address the situation as that is problematic from their perspective.
Okay, shall we call that answer number 2, or maybe? Yeah,
I will forget the numbers. So let's just
no, because the next question that was upvoted here, it might, I don't know. That's of course up to you, but sometimes the enemy may be inside the company. Example, a leader inside a large corporation with a narrow vision or very personal agenda, competing with other leaders and hence not willing to collaborate. How to handle this situation?
Well, probably the one of the most important things I've come to understand from this work is that the wish for other people not to have their own agendas is futile. I would go so far as to say almost everybody has their own agenda of one sort or another. They have their own interests, their own incentives, their own, whether it's for their department or their family or themselves personally, psychologically, financially, politically, something that matters to them that's maybe congruent with, maybe not congruent with the objectives of the organization as a whole. So I think this idea that the precondition is that participants in the collaboration must not have their own agenda or their own assertion or competition, I think is well, I don't think you're going to have much collaboration if that's a precondition. For me, what's more interesting, and I think this is where your field, Horacio, of negotiation has brought it out so clearly, as Fisher and Yuri did in their work getting to yes, is to recognize that everybody has interests and agendas. That's fine. Let's try to make them visible, and let's see how we can find a way forward given these, yes, our commonalities and our differences. So I think this idea that we must all want the same thing, we must all be thinking beyond ourselves is, as I mentioned earlier, in many contexts, illegitimate or even manipulative.
Yep.
And to recognize, no, we are different, and the challenge is how to find a way to live and work together across our differences. Here, the difference between English and Spanish has always interested me. In English, the word that's used most often, at least in the peace negotiation field, is the word coexistence. But in Spanish, and I think Portuguese as well, you would say convivencia. And this is an interesting word because it means literally cohabitation. It's the same word used for, you could say, a negotiation like we're talking about here, but it's the same word used for a couple living together, convivencia. And when we say it, you would never say, I coexist with my spouse. That's a little bit of a cold way of saying it, but I'm living together with my spouse or my partner, and that immediately evokes, yes, we agree on some things, we disagree on other things, and we find a way to live together. So I'm really interested in convivencia. And I think that's where has as the precondition that we illuminate and recognize differences. You know, there's a famous marriage researcher, I don't know if you ever heard the name, John Gottman.
Yep.
He's famous for having, I think, recorded, I don't know, tens of thousands of hours of therapy sessions. And he has this amazing statistic that 67% of marital disagreements, 67% relate to things which cannot be solved. They're fundamental differences in culture or personality. And that successful marriages are those that manage to work together or ignore or laugh about these differences because they can't be solved. And I think this statistic is also helpful for work settings.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think on that note, I'm actually gonna. Oh, sorry, just got bumped out. There was a question that goes with the expression you mentioned before, the get to. So how does one get to a consensus on good for the whole with someone who is one's enemy? So is there a hybrid on the two columns that you brought in? I'm adding the last part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of hybrids, but I think that's not the most productive or interesting approach. I guess I would say two things. That I'd be careful about the word enemy. It's I mean, I'm not saying we never have enemies. Sometimes we do, people who are trying to harm or injure us. But the excessive use of the word enemy, I think, is a problem in the world these days. And is used for people that we disagree with or we don't like or who looked at us funny on the street. So that's the first thing. But the second, and I think more fundamental point, is I'm arguing that in in all situations of high complexity and or high conflict, we have to find a way to acknowledge both what is best for the whole we're dealing with and the parts, but to be more precise, the wholes that are part of that larger whole. And that's the challenge. That's where the negotiation literature offers us such a rich menu of what is the way to deal with both at the same time. I made a joke about, or I made a reference when I said that I'll be presenting this book in live for the first time in a couple of weeks to a global convention of divorce lawyers. I don't know much about divorce law, thankfully. But I assume that that's the essence of that work there. It's called in the legal profession collaborative professionals. It refers both to lawyers and financial advisors and I think psychologists who work together to help people who are separating. And I assume that the basic point about that is we're not one team. To say, think of the whole, well, the whole is broken. And the question is how to think about those things we have in common, which I suppose relate to assets and children and family circumstances, and also about the apparently very different interests and needs of the divorcing couple. So I think it's a good example. So I'm coming back to answer number one again, which is that to me, the requirement that we all only think about the larger whole rarely works. Or it works only under circumstance of low complexity and low conflict.
There you go. So there's a question here who was very upvoted, but I'm not sure I fully understood it. So I'm just going to read it as is, and let's hope that you get it better than I did, which is how do we win over someone who doesn't like it, comma, as it hurts their conflict of interests? That's it. And if it's
Well,
not clear to you, we can ask someone to add on, or we can open. Yeah.
well, I mean, I'll take it as it's written.
Okay.
You know, I'm sorry to be so pedantic about wording, but I am an author, so I guess I'm allowed to care a lot about words. But you may or may not win over, and if you're determined to win over, you're probably at a disadvantage from the beginning. I think the challenge for living and working together is to find a way that sort of works for all parties. And if I think that you won over me, it's not like this agreement or convivencia is gonna be durable or sustainable. And again, I come back to answer number one. I think it's almost always crucial to recognize the different interests of different parties rather than assuming them away. And yeah.
Super. No, I think that at least it helped me understand a bit more of the question as well. So thank you. I hope the person who asked it and those who upvoted it felt answered as well. So another question here, what do you do when there have been recent events that make emotions strong, dislike high, and rational decision-making difficult? Even if you are choosing to be rational and see the bigger picture, how do you overcome the anger and emotions to work with the other side?
Oh, I'm appreciating these questions because I can hear behind them real stories and real histories. So, and I said at the beginning that collaborating across difference is not easy. It's not straightforward. It's not guaranteed to work. And I have many such experiences almost every day of one sort or another. And often these feelings of anger or hurt or frustration for me last hours, if not days, if not weeks. So I think part of the answer is maybe to give yourself some time. It usually takes me a while before I've calmed down enough to say, okay, what's going on here? I wonder what's going on for this other person. And this is the third stretch, I wonder what my role in this is. It's a very interesting exercise. It's given each of the chapters in the book. In the second edition, each of the chapters has exercises for the reader. I'm very happy about this. They were developed by my colleague Ian Prinsloo. And the exercise in the chapter on the third stretch is about considering a situation in two ways. One is if from the outside, focusing on who's doing what that's creating the situation as it is. And the second is from the inside, how is what I'm doing contributing to the situation being as it is. It's a very simple exercise. You can do it by yourself or with others. But I've done it a lot in workshops, and I find that when people consider their own role in the situation, they have two reactions. One, they feel guilty, and second, more guilty, and secondly, they feel more agential. In other words, they have agency. And when they realize, oh my God, what I'm doing is contributing to things being the way, then suddenly, and by definition, there's something I can do immediately. It's completely in my control to change what I'm doing. So I guess my answer would be yes, that happens a lot. It's difficult. I experience that every week in one dimension or another. To take the time to be able to calm down enough to be able to ask yourself these questions and see, is there something I can do that offers us a possible way forward? It may be the answer is no, and the answer is I have to force or adapt or exit. And so it's helpful to always remember collaborating is not our only option.
There you go. Well, thank you. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. Let me try to sneak them in. So one is a little bit broader now, is based on your experience. Have you noticed throughout your years of working with this that differences have grown to be more polarized around the world? You mentioned something briefly at the beginning. Has that changed how you approach your work? So two questions, right?
Yeah. Well, it's always difficult. You know, to make statements about how things are different than the way they used to be. I have a limited time span of my own experience, and although I've worked in more than 50 countries, it's not the same that The same thing is happening everywhere.
Mhm.
But yes, as a generalization, I would say that people report to me everywhere, everywhere I work, Canada, the Netherlands, Colombia, Thailand, just to pick a random series of examples, that fragmentation, polarization, and demonization are increasing, and that people are, yeah, less willing to work with those they disagree with. And the reason I'm saying this slowly is I realize in formulating my answer that it's also related to this other phenomena about being less present. You know, this is as somebody who works a lot with groups in the room and has for decades, the fact that people are on their phones is a dramatic difference because it means they're not actually in the room. Their brain is focused on something outside the room, and which is why phones are such an impediment to this work. And in the extreme, one needs to leave them at the door in entering the room, not for reasons of confidentiality, but for reasons of presence. And people have made the same comments to me post-COVID that their willingness to actually get out of their house and travel to be in a room with somebody, with people they don't agree with or like or trust, has diminished. So for many reasons, which I enumerate in the introduction of the book, I believe that collaborating cross difference is becoming both more important and more difficult, and therefore the number of occasions where what's required is what I'm calling stretch collaboration is increasing.
Super. And so have you changed how you approach stretch collaboration, or are you just applying more of it, or did anything change in the last few years? Did you see the need to evolve and adapt to that higher polarization and lack of presence? Are you asking people to not bring their phones in and leave it at the door, for example, or is...
Yes, so mechanically, yes.
Okay.
Leaving the cell phone at the door is a big
Yeah,
help.
for example.
But secondly, the information ecosystem, the potential for misinformation, disinformation, lack of agreement on shared facts, these all require more attention than they did 20 years ago.
You see. So there seems to be a group of questions that are basically saying, how do you negotiate with someone like a narcissist or someone who really wants just something for them and who doesn't try to contribute to the process or not listen and is only just like me, win-win for me only? Like there's 2 or 3 questions in the middle here, which are basically talking about that. How do you reach out and collaborate at all with that person? I think we had even one at the beginning, and you reminded us, well, remember, there are 3 other things to do.
Yeah.
But
well,
I think people are, yeah.
I'll give answer number 1 again. So
Okay.
I'll say C number 1, but I would add to it the following. And this, I think, is the key point in the exercise from the stretch 3 that I alluded to 5 minutes ago, or that I summarized 5 minutes ago. That I think that, so now I'm going to be a little more sharp in my answer. I think there's a very frequent tendency, most of us do it, I do it all the time, is our very first answer is they're doing something wrong. They're a narcissist. They're not interested. They're selfish. They're this, they're that. They're not listening. They don't care. And my sharp answer is to say that's the easy answer. It's all their fault. If only they would change, we'd be fine. I did a lot of work in India in 2006. Yes, 2006. And very complicated, confusing, complex project related to child malnutrition. I got very confused at a certain point, and I asked a mentor of mine, a man named Arun Maira. Some of you may know him. What's really going on here, Arun? And he said, Adam, what's really going on is when we have a group of stakeholder leaders, when they enter the room, 100% of them believe that it's the fault of the others. If only those other people would change, we'd be fine. Well, if we're all here, it's not mathematically possible that it's all the other people's fault. So what are we doing here? We're trying to help people see, oh, this is what I'm contributing to the way things are. And this is how, by changing what I'm doing, how I can change the situation. So my sharp answer is be careful when the only thing you can think of is what those other people are doing wrong. First of all, it's useless. You can't get anybody to change at all. At least that's my experience. And you're avoiding the more productive and more difficult question, which is, how is what I'm doing contributing to the way things are the way they are? And how can, by changing what I'm doing, change the way things are? So I come back over and over to stretch 3. This is the fundamental thing. How am I part of the game?
Fantastic. So, Adam, I think because we're running out of time, there are lots of questions. Given that you're starting a tour around your book and all, I'll be glad to send you those questions so you can anticipate what more questions might come your way. But for now, would you like to give like some parting words or words of wisdoms for the group? And then I will do our normal closing to the audience.
Yeah, just to say thank you. As I say, it's the first time I present this new book, so it's fun. And I'm very struck by this theme through the questions. How do we deal with those people? And I think, although it's tough, the answer of there's nothing we can do about those people, all we can do is about us and what we're doing, I think is a good parting thought. I'll be starting to present the work in person next month. I welcome other opportunities, online or in person, and the book is available for pre-order. Read it. I hope you found it useful.
Yes, I think they will. I did very much. So, Adam, thank you very much. I'm gonna actually now post some slides. First one with information about your book and resources for people who already are used to pick up your phone so you can start taking photos of those QR codes so you can access them later or now if you want. So here's to learn more about his book, and here's to get some more insights and resources from his work. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to be moving to the next slide because that's where you actually have access to the pre-order of the book. And as you can see there, if you take a photo, you can actually get, or a screenshot, you can actually get a code to get a discount on that pre-order. It's valid for the US and ebooks worldwide. So 30% off. So Adam pre-negotiated that to give us as a gift. So thank you, Adam, for that extra contribution to our learning and growth in this field. So just if I could, before I move on to other things, non-Adam, can I just ask people to do a big reaction and shower him with love and hearts and other nice little reactions for him to see and take a picture, put on his social media if you want, and all of that. Look at that. That's a lot of love. Thank you so much. So much, Adam. It's a real pleasure. And thank you so much for donating your time and sharing your wisdom and your ideas with us. Yeah. And it doesn't stop. Look at that. It doesn't stop. You should be recording that. This is so cool. Yeah. So if I may now, just moving on, because a few of you have to jump out because you do have a day ahead of you. Just reminding you that we had already a bunch of fantastic speakers. Now we had Adam. We're going to have our last one of the year. Will be 27 November. Dr. Huda Abadi talking about peacemaking and Islamic principles, how the fusion of the two can actually help peacemaking in regions that Muslim majorities or minorities are relevant for peacemaking processes. This will be I think, fantastic way for us to finish the year of our webinar. And so feel free to register already here with this QR code. Here's our project, the NCW, the Cases for the World. We have in English, we have in Arabic. And later this year or early next year, we're actually going to launch the other 128 languages. So free negotiation materials for anyone, everyone in the world at an INSEAD level of quality. So it will be coming in your language. We're going to do wiki style so people can upload, improve, and things of sorts. So keep an eye out. More is coming. Here's some recent resources. The latest one would be the one on the upper right corner, an article that I co-wrote my friend and colleague Rodrigo Gouveia on Trump's tariff negotiations. We do a breakdown. It's a short article, just about 8 pages. And there are a few other expert pieces from other colleagues of ours on different aspects of tariff presumption negotiations. Other articles here that those who came before already seen, but if this is your first time, you may have an interest. AI, meditation, cross-cultural, all elements negotiation. Here is my book, if I may. Sorry, Adam, just sliding that in as well a little bit. On the left, of Pharma, Price, and Power, for those interested in healthcare and how negotiation shapes healthcare. The book, the next one that just came out about a month ago, is just a chapter of mine, Negotiators Who Changed the World. So you have people like Nelson Mandela, Jesus Christ, and one that I will highly recommend to Adam to read for reasons that I'll explain in a minute, the one on Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the father of the United Arab Emirates, who was basically the only real story in recent history of someone who managed to put together or facilitate and lead a negotiation of different countries, or emirates in that case, to become one country peacefully, with no pressure, no power, no conflict, no war. And Adam, I think it does follow the multiple holes and the multiple, right, and the co-creation. So it might be an interesting case for you to look into. There's actually going to be a role play. There will be a business case that will be done based on that article as well, that will be launched in our upcoming conference in the Middle East on November 26th. That will be the official launch of that. This is for you to join our mailing list and to be accessible to the NCMC so that you can be part of our community. And for those of you who stayed here with us, thank you so much. The last thing I'm going to ask you too is, as we're approaching the end of our series of webinars, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, if you have authors like Adam or others in the field of negotiation, conflict management, or close to, please give us those names. Feel free to already put them now on the questions, or send us emails, or connect with us, or prepare for us for next session, so that we can start inviting them to create a fantastic and exciting lineup for you as well next year. With that, let me once again say, Adam, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure meeting you in person, even if just virtually, and congratulations for the beautiful work you're doing. It's helping a lot of people. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day and a great launch.